Are we recording? Okay. Well, it appears to be 7 o'clock, so we'll go ahead and call the meeting to order, and we'll start as usual.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, so I welcome everybody to the March meeting of the Township Planning Commission, our third in-person meeting. And we'll start with the roll call.
Albrecht, here. Buckley,
Here.
Gross is excused. LaBelle,
Here.
Flat, here. Shingles,
Here.
Quadrille,
Here.
Herring, here. And Williams.
Here. Thank you. So, since our last meeting, 2 of our members whose terms were expiring were reappointed. So, Commissioners Buckley and don't have names kind of fall. So, our 2 continuing commissioners were reappointed. We also have 2 new commissioners, one of whom couldn't be here tonight, that's Paul Gross, but I want to welcome Jack Williams to the Planning Commission. We're glad to have you here, and we're looking forward to serving with you and having you in. Appreciate it. So, we have our agenda for tonight, and it's got several new business items, as well as some returning business items. So, is there anything else that anyone is aware of that needs to be on tonight's agenda? Any corrections or additions to the agenda? Not, I'd entertain a motion to approve the agenda as prepared. So moved. A motion by LaBelle, second by Rob to approve the agenda and approve the discussion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, we have our agenda. Next item is last met on February 15th. So you have the February 15th minutes. Are there any corrections to the February 15th minutes?
To accept the minutes.
Motion by Shingles to accept the minutes as submitted. To your second. Mark. Second by Buckley for the discussion. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, so we're good. Next item is correspondence, board reports, and presentation. So, in order that they're listed on the agenda, the first item is Commissioner Thayer, updates from Board of Trustees.
Thank you. At our last trustee meeting, one of the things that the board did was to vote to increase the funding to finish the road construction, the Lincoln Road construction project, which will entail on Broomfield, east and west, towards the intersection, going to 3 lanes with curb and gutter. And then as it goes away from the intersection, it'll taper down to 2 lanes. Lincoln Road, north and south, maybe some paving going to the south just a little bit, but to the north, to the Chippewa River Bridge, it'll go to 3 lanes, curb and gutter with, and then a paved shoulder. And the paved shoulder will also be on the east and west, 4 to 5 feet. The increased funding, well, we had the general fund through the trustees had about $167,000 set aside for that project, but there was a loss in some grant money due to time. And so we did approve $300,000 to, in additional money to help finish that project up. That, and then The EDA had come to the board requesting a resolution to go from 11 to 9 members. They felt having 9 members would be a little bit more manageable group, along with helping with making their quorums. So we went ahead and approved that. And I believe today might have been the first meeting with 9 members. That's what I have.
Did I hear correctly that Broomfield Lincoln is going to be a roundabout now?
No,
No?
it's just an intersection.
So it's just a, but there's a light going in at the expansion as well, or no?
No light.
No light, oh, okay.
Nope. No, and there's, if you go and look at our meeting packet from last meeting, at the very end, it actually goes into more detail than what I gave you.
Okay.
I just kind of gave you a quick overview
Sure.
of that.
Okay.
Yeah, no, that's,
Any questions for Commissioner Barron or trustee for the issue? So when you say 3 lanes, it's a turn lane in the middle,
a church, yep.
or a turn lane. Is it, what's happening then on Lincoln south of the intersection? Is that also being, or is that staying as it is?
I think that's gonna stay as is. There'll be, maybe there'll be a little bit of pavement going up, but nothing else. Nothing like the other roads going in the other directions where there'll be some curb and gutter and then paved shoulders.
And then I remember when this was discussed earlier, there was a question about, is the road going to be closed or not? Do you happen to know whether the road is going to remain open northbound?
I don't know. I can't answer that. Maybe Rodney, if you.
I don't think they're to that point in the plan yet. There could be, pick the project up a bit shortly and those details will be, I assume we'll be hearing about those details in the next few months. But it is intended to be a quick project. Try to get it done, basically, in September, or the vast majority of it. So it's going to be a very quick project.
It's a major artery for those of us on the side of the township, so anytime it's closed, it's really,
Yeah, I know exactly what you're thinking.
because this will be the 3rd time in the last 10 years that road's, if it ends up being closed, it ends up being closed.
Getting across the river is not easy if you're not going to cross something.
Any other questions on board trustees? Okay, next item is Commissioner Buckley updates from zoning board of appeals.
We did not have a meeting last month, and as far as I know, I don't think we have a meeting planned for next month either. I think there's no agenda, or am I?
The meeting in April is the joint meeting.
Oh, that's correct, yeah. So, some new updates on that front from ZBA.
Okay. Any questions for Commissioner Buckley on ZBA related matters? Okay, and then we'll move on. So you've got updates from Sidewalks and Pathways. Our representative to that was our former Commissioner Darren. So I don't know if we have a report on that. Do you guys have anything to report? We can skip it if there's nothing to report. I know we're going to be electing a representative tonight.
Their February meeting was canceled due to inclement weather, roughly 18 days. So they, the next meeting is
Anyone else have anything to report? Any reports, presentations? Next item is public comment. So we have at the front of our meeting a public comment that is for items not on the agenda. So at this time, I would invite any member of the public who would like to address the planning commission to come to the podium if you'd like, give us your name and address for minutes. Limit your comments to 3 minutes on any item that is not on tonight's agenda. Welcome.
I'm Danny, 2270, 23 East Broomfield Road. First, I'd like to welcome new commissioners. I don't know Mr. Williams, but Mr. Theron is held you in high regard, so he's a pretty good judge of character, so I'm looking forward to your participation. I know Paul Gross, and I think he's going to be a very good addition also, and I'm sure that both of you guys are going to be independent and logical thinkers when you're looking through these projects. The reason why I'm here is to discuss two items that we just discussed, and that is the Broomfield Lincoln Road corridor. I've been very involved in that project for several years now, and I've been following it very closely. And how it almost got derailed by the Board of Trustees at the end of December and January. Luckily, I was aware of that and was able to negate what they were trying to do. So, first, that area has been neglected regarding infrastructure such as sewer, water, and roads forever. The Road Commission, in conjunction with Union Township, has just recently procured and approved the funding for the revision of Lincoln Road south of the bridge in the intersection of Broomfield in all four directions. The project will bring this portion of the road up to a Class A status, which eliminates the weight restrictions and better serves the commercial trucking industry and provides a better route that bypasses the congested roads of high emission streets. This area is a commercial corridor, a repeat commercial corridor, and serves not only the trucking industry but also the community, university, and vehicle traffic wishing to bypass the congestion and get to the expressway or to the Union Township shopping district of Bluegrass Road. It is not, I repeat, it is not a rural buffer. It is a commercial corridor, and your master plan should reflect that fact. It is a living document. This area will never receive water and sewer to thrive and prosper without the change to that document. Commissioner Spatrio, you mentioned it. It's a major artery. The second thing is the zoning along Broomfield Road in the area of my residence and business. My wife and I purchased our house in 1989. It has always been used as a residence. Sometime in the early mid-90s, our property and our neighbor's property on both sides of the street was changed to B4 from R1. This change starts at the business's west property line and extends 300 feet in depth on both sides of the road to the Mount Pleasant city limits. What this zoning change did was make all of our houses and outbuildings non-conforming structures per the township zoning ordinances. This designation means that if any of us want to improve or increase our structures, we would have to pay a fee and appear in front of the Union Township ZBA for a variance, which is not a certainty. This designation also means that if our houses or outbuildings were to be destroyed by fire or weather event, we couldn't rebuild. My next door neighbor's house is zoned residential, but when he steps into his driveway, it's commercial. Figure that one out. I have just recently witnessed a ZBA meeting where my neighbor across the street was requesting a variance for a minor setback on an outbuilding. And it became a modern version of Dan Aykroyd and Jan Curtin and point counterpoint between two commissioners. This is not something we should be subjected to in order to improve our properties. I'm sure none of you are burdened with the situation at your own residences. If you want to add to your home or build a workshop, you go to the township and you get a building permit. If your home is destroyed or damaged, you rebuild. We would like the same privilege. Thank you.
No public comments at this time. Well, as always, we thank the public for their comments, and I assume those have been recorded as best as possible for the minutes, and so we'll have those to up. So if there's no further public comments at this time, this section of public comment is closed. I guess I didn't give the time when it was open, but it's 7:15, so closed at 7:15. And we'll have an extended public comment later in the evening. we'll move on to our new business items. The first item is something that we now do every March. We used to do it earlier, but we now do it in March, which is the election of officers of the planning commission and representatives to the other boards for this year, through March of 2023. So we have three office positions. I guess, help me out. Do we not have an official vice secretary position? Or do we? Because it seems to me we went through this last year.
I think we went through this, and it's my fault. I gave the list to Kara, and I did not include the vice secretary in there. It is an official position, and I let it off.
Okay, well, the procedure mavens are gonna give me a hard time because I would like, we did the exact same thing last year. We approved the agenda without it in there. Is it too late? Because I guess we can elect the vice secretary next meeting, like we did last year. Help me here. What's the pleasure of the body?
Good to amend the agenda to include the vice secretary, or is it too late to do that?
Well, Stan, you have to comment on the procedure. From my perspective, I had no concern with amending the agenda vice secretary. It was essentially a typo. It's a mental typo. For some reason, I forgot it again. But I don't. Yeah, you had a concern last year.
Yeah, well, and I think because of the content of what's being changed, I would not be opposed to a motion to previous approval, because it's not a substantive change at all.
Okay, so there's a motion by Commissioner Lapp to add vice secretary as one of the elected positions to item 8A, seconded by Buckley. Further discussion? Appreciate the indulgence of the commission on this, like these glitches that they do have occasionally. Any further discussion? Not all in favor of the motion, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? So we'll have four offices. So we have chair, vice chair, secretary, vice secretary. The chair runs the meetings. The vice chair would serve in the absence of the chair and run the meetings. Secretary doesn't take the complete set of minutes, but the secretary is responsible for tracking, particularly items related to when we're doing site plans and other sorts of things, the changes, the conditions, and has the authority of signing those on the documents, as well as signing the minutes. And vice secretary serves in the absence of the secretary. So we'll take them in that order. Are there any nominations for chair for this coming year?
I'll nominate Bill.
Second.
Okay, so there was a nomination by Buckley for Rodrigo, and it was seconded by Darren. Are there any other nominations? I'm told I'm supposed to ask that 3 times. Those are the rules that I know. Are there any other nominations? Are there any other nominations for chair? Okay, I do accept the nomination. And so, if there are no other nominations, then the motion can be to elect. And so, we will, second. So then we will vote. So all in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Appreciate the vote of confidence. Vice chair. Once again, vice chair would serve as chair in the absence of the chair. We run the meeting and so on and so forth. Are there any nominations for vice chair?
I nominate Commissioner Buckley.
Second.
Does Commissioner Buckley accept the nomination? So we have a nomination by Shingles and a second by Theron to, for Commissioner Buckley to serve as vice chair for this coming year. Are there any other nominations? Are there any other nominations? Are there any other nominations? If not, then that motion, if the mover would like to, can be essentially a motion to elect. And let's see if it's that among the mover and the second. So, all in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. So we have a vice chair for the coming year. Next one is secretary. Again, secretary primarily keeps track of the substantive changes or conditions related to actions we're taking and make sure that those get recorded on documents, planning documents. So, are there nominations for secretary?
Nominate Commissioner Bell. Second.
Okay, so motion was by Buckley to nominate Commissioner Bell, there was a second by Shingles, is that right?
Yes.
Do you accept the nomination?
I'll accept the nomination.
Okay.
Thank you.
Are there other nominations for secretary? Are there other nominations for secretary? Are there other nominations for secretary? Hearing none, we'll make that a motion to elect. All in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Congratulations. Secretary. And then the last is vice secretary who performs those duties if the secretary is unable to be at a particular meeting. Is there a nomination for vice secretary?
Nominate Commissioner Albrecht.
For a second?
I'll second.
Do you accept the nomination?
Yes, I do.
Okay, excellent. So the motion was by Buckley with a second by Lapp to nominate Commissioner Albrecht as vice secretary for this coming year. Are there any other nominations? Are there any other nominations? Are there any other nominations? Hearing none, motion is to elect Commissioner Albrecht as vice secretary for this coming year. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? So, we have our officers. Congratulations, everyone. A great team. So we have a couple of representatives to other bodies that we need to designate. The first one is the Zoning Board of Appeals representative. They meet, they're scheduled to meet quarterly, is that right? But they basically meet as needed, so if there are agenda items, they meet. If they're not agenda items, they don't meet. And the meetings are when?
The first Wednesday of each month.
Okay.
The last 2 years anyway, they've had about 4 times.
So roughly 4 weeks. Is there a nomination for a commissioner to serve as the commission's representative to the zoning board of appeals?
Ryan, you're correct. I'd like to nominate Commissioner Buckley.
I'll support that.
Do you accept that nomination? So the motion was by Theron with a second by LaBelle to nominate Commissioner Buckley as the commission's representative to the ZBA. Are there any other nominations? Are there any other nominations? Are there any other nominations? Here's none. We'll make that a motion to elect. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries, so congratulations. We appreciate your willingness to do that. And then the last one is the representative to the Sidewalks and Pathways Prioritization Committee. So this position was held by Mike Darren, who has now retired from the commission. His term expired last month and he did not seek renewal. So that is a vacant position currently. The Sidewalks and Pathways Prioritization Committee meets periodically. What is their meeting schedule?
They essentially meet 4 times per year. One of those meetings is meeting with you in January. Their role is sort of 2 parts. The first part of the year, they're focused on making recommendations for potential public sidewalk projects for the next fiscal year. Basically recommending those forward. Our budget cycle essentially begins in July, start budget planning for fiscal year 2023. So we're looking for them to recommend that recommendation before that. In the latter part of the year, they have a meeting usually in September, October, where they look at sort of longer term issues. The idea anyway, sort of more regional approach, or look at longer term vision priorities to recommend. It works out to be basically 4 meetings a year.
And it's a congenial group of about 5 people, as I recall. So, and you know, it's a body of the, you know, it's a representative body of the planning commission. So it is important that we have a representative there and get information about what they're thinking and vice versa. So, are there any nominations for the planning commissioner to serve as our representative to the Sidewalks and Pathways Prioritization Committee?
I would love to see Commissioner Lapp nominated.
I would have to respectfully decline, as my husband serves on that board. It would be a conflict of interest there.
Understood.
And you have no plans to get divorced?
Not that I know of.
Just give you one.
Any other nominations? Or any nominations? When are they scheduled to meet again?
The end of April, so we do have another opportunity to pursue this again.
So we do have one commissioner who's not here, so we could, if we can't, we don't have a nomination. But are there any nominations for our representatives to set up?
We make a motion to postpone that till next meeting. And everyone needs to. That particular seat, or do we need to fill it today?
No, I don't think we need to fill it today, based on what Rodney said, in the sense that they're not scheduled to meet again until after our next meeting. So we could, if necessary, we could postpone. I'm not even sure we necessarily need a motion in the sense that if we don't appoint it, it stays vacant, but we could have a motion to postpone.
I definitely don't want to put Commissioner Williams or Commissioner Shingles on the spot, so I mean, if they want to, for Commissioner Williams' sake, you see what it's about. And Stan, I don't know what your schedule is.
There's no interest on it. I'll accept the nomination.
You'd be interested?
I I'd be happy to nominate Stan.
Second.
You look like a little loud.
I sympathize because I know you don't need one more meeting. But I think we would certainly value the service. So, let's see, so the motion was by Buckley, was a second, again by Theron, to nominate Commissioner Shingles to serve as the representative to the Sidewalks and Pathways Prioritization Committee for this coming year. Are there any other nominations? Are there any other nominations? Are there any other nominations? Okay. If not, then that would be in motion to elect. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Congratulations. So thank you. We have our officers and representatives. So we completed that agenda item. So we're ready to move on to the other agenda items, the items that we're actually considering tonight. First one is a special use permit application PSEP 22-02. It is for a proposed self-storage facility in the B4 district at 5252 South Mission Road. And as you see your agenda, we'll start with an introduction by Township staff. We will have a presentation from the applicant. This will be a public hearing, so we'll have a public hearing, and then we will move on to our own deliberation and action. So, turn it over to Rob.
The Zoom meeting started, I can just start, but remember I need to get microphone. So thank you. So the project we have before you is a self-storage facility in warehouses. This is on South Mission Road, south of Deerfield Road. It's near the town called the Summer Hill Village Mobile Home Park. And it's a total of 11 buildings. It is a new facility proposed. One wrinkle in regards to this project that's noted in the report, I'll just mention it here at the beginning. Last year, when we did our punch list set of amendments, one of the items that was included on that list was to remove self-storage warehouse facilities from the B4 district, the district that this property is in. We did, in fact, remove it from the overall table of land uses. That's the table that had all the land uses, all the zoning districts. But there was one errant reference that was left in the separate D4 zoning district summary statement document, where it's still listed as special use. That did not get deleted. So it was left in there through the amendment process. And so when the applicant approached us with this, we looked and realized that it was still listed there. We hadn't recognized that it is still listed as a special use in the B4 district, so therefore they had the right to apply as a secret. So we reviewed it from that perspective. Obviously, we'll have to look at this issue again. But right now, this is a lawful special use in the B4 district, and so the applications are treated as such. I'm happy to answer any questions as we go along, but that's a quick one.
Okay, thank you. Is the applicant or applicant representative here? If you'd like to give us any sort of introduction to the project before we proceed to the public hearing.
Good evening, my name is Tim Dean, Commissioner of Civil Development, 2257 East Broomfield Road, here on behalf of the owner developer, which is Bernard here. And I guess after that introduction by Robbie, I'd like to make sure that everybody understands we did come to the planning and ask specifically whether or not this was something that was still allowed. And we were told yes, otherwise we would not be So it's not that we're trying to slip it under, if you got that impression from the introduction. It was a piece of property that was looked at for purchase, and the question was asked before the purchase to make sure that it was going to be something that was still be considered. We turned in for a special use, and if you look at the adjoining neighborhood, we have the storage facility immediately across the road to the east. So as far as out of character for the area, we have neighboring property, which is the identical use. Wrapped around us on the north and west side is the trailer park, which is hopefully going to be some of our tenants within the storage units. They tend to be some of the people that like to use the storage facilities because they don't have necessarily garages and those types of at their residence. So with that, if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer about the plan. We feel that it does fit the zone and it fits the surrounding area specifically. With that, happy to answer any questions that you may have in your deliberation or if it comes up in public hearing.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, they're not going anywhere, so they'll be here to answer our questions when we get to deliberation. So at this point, we'll move to the public hearing. So, because it's a special use permit, it carries a public hearing. It was in the newspaper, residents, any property owners within 300 feet, I believe it is, would have been notified. And so, when we have public hearings, we want to give everyone who wants to speak an opportunity to speak. So we'll ask you to come to the podium where the microphone is, give us your name and address for the minute, address your comments to the planning commission, and limit your comments to 3 minutes. Once everyone who wants to speak has had an opportunity to speak at least once, we'll consider recognizing people for additional comments. So the public hearing on PSUP 22-02 open at 7:37.
And down 2270, 2280 East Broomfield Road. To be frank with you, I didn't have any intent of standing up for any public hearing until I heard that introduction by the Economic Development Coordinator and how I think improper that was to basically try to kill this gentleman's project before it was even discussed. It doesn't matter whether it was a nuance or and to undermine this project and all the money that this gentleman spent properly in engineering by the way it was introduced, I think was highly improper. Thank you.
Other public comments? Were there any written comments received on this, or emails or anything? Other comments at the public hearing on this project? So I think every time we have one of these, I say if someone rushes in the door 30 seconds after we close the hearing, I'll still let them speak, but I don't think it's ever actually happened. But sooner or later, it probably will. Last call for comments, public comments at the public hearing on this application. Hearing none, we'll thank the public for their comments, they'll be recorded in the minutes, and public hearing is closed at 7:40. So now we move to commission deliberation and action. So the item is before us, you have the application, the applicant and the applicant's representative are here. So we will open it up to commissioners to questions from the commissioners. Questions or comments?
I'm curious, the plot is 7 acres, and you think, farm directors will look at these buildings and say, this is how much it's using, but how much is the initial footprint of this? Is this using the whole plot? Okay. Roughly?
Roughly 5.5.
Okay. So would it be something that there'd be opportunity to expand in the future?
Well, possibly, the lot, physical features of the lot kind of separate. You've got quite a hill there. So trying to take those buildings up that slope
Yeah.
would be very difficult.
Right.
So that's why it's looked at as the development that it is, because we can move that earth around and balance that portion. But if I were to try and come up with a balance, I'd end up with an 8-foot cut to try and get it down and even so that I can actually make it usable. So the physical features and boundary of the land kind of dictate that.
Okay.
And maybe I just missed it, is there anything else regarding lighting? Did I miss that on here? So just a couple of details, in our report, we do note that the lighting would be needed as part of the final site plan. Exterior lighting is a final site plan detail, it's not part of preliminary site plan. They did, for example, provide some landscaping information, but landscaping is actually also a final site plan item, so whether that's what it gets approved. As you note in our report, we found, with the exception of one item of information, that is, it sort of did list the hours or days of operation for some detail, that this project met the requirements for the special use permit, or can meet the requirements, subject to a few details that will come up as part of the conversation. So, I do want to, if I may take your question just for a moment to apply. I did not mean to in any way imply that this project was not something that should go forward. It absolutely should. That's why I said that it's lawful special use. The ordinance says it's a special use. We move forward with it, and absolutely have no intent to apply it. As our report says, this project either meets the requirements for a special use permit or it can meet them, subject to those details that will come up as part of the final site.
Are there hours of operation of self-storage?
The normal hours of operation within Mount Pleasant, every facility here is a 24-hour facility. The one directly across the road is a 24-hour facility. There's 2 locations in town that actually have gates that work, McGurk and the gentleman across the road from me. And so all of them are just open gates, driving in and out. We will have a gate, and we'll also have a security cameras and those kind of things to take care of that. But the desire is to operate just like everybody else at 24 hours.
What is it? You said you're gonna have gates?
Pardon?
You said you're gonna have gates?
Correct. There will be a gate with a keypad.
So, okay, that's what I was curious, how that works.
Yeah.
Access 24 hours was.
If you go to the group facility, it will operate the same, although he has 2 gates. And, we'll either have 2 smaller gates or 1 large gate. We don't have time access.
Other questions?
It's open to
I guess I just want to say that I read the staff report, and I also listened to the introduction. I didn't find it to be an attempt to influence us in any particular way with regard to. I thought it was just very matter of fact that, stating the situation and saying, okay, this is still an allowed use. And when it's an allowed use, you have to give it the full consideration that you give to any other application. Allowed special use, privileged special use in that district, and so that's what we do. Now, one thing we have done in the past is, at some point, is we've gone down the standards, and typically I've read them, and we've discussed them, or at least we've given commissioners the opportunity to voice any concerns that they might have with any of the standards. So, if you're ready to do that, we can proceed with that. If not, I'm happy to ask for the questions and comments. Okay.
I asked a historical question. Why in the zoning revisions were the self-storage facilities taken out of the B4? I'm just curious why that decision was made. I think it predated when I joined the planning commission.
So this was something that was looked at from the perspective of differentiating business districts. We have 3 business districts, we each have 4, the self-storage warehouses are allowed in all 3 of them currently, in one form or another, permitted or by special use. They're also allowed in the industrial districts. So it's looking at essentially, is there a need for these to be in the B4? Looking at where the B4 district tends to be in the community, and the other one, the character of the B4 district, other than the special use, it is more of a neighborhood commercial character, more smaller scale. So that was why it was recommended as a change. I think at this point, certainly what I would recommend is that we revisit this when we look at the master plan, and look at it from a broader perspective and then make decisions further. So we certainly have no intent to go back and do anything further with it right now. We don't want to be looking at this and then if it were to be approved, make it a non-conforming use statement. There's no interest in doing it to that extent. So I thought it would be a topic to look at when we next review the master plan.
Any questions? Are we ready to proceed with the checklist? Okay. So, like I said, there's 7 items, and we'll go ahead and consider them individually. We just dealt with the first one. Proposed land use is identified in section 3 as a special use in the zoning district. Yes. 2, the location, design, activities, processes, materials, equipment, and operational conditions of the special use will not be hazardous, detrimental, or injurious to the environment or the public health, safety, or general welfare by reason of traffic, noise, vibration, smoke, fumes, odors, dust, glare, light, drainage, pollution, or other adverse impacts. So typically, we just, it's a somewhat of a free-for-all. If you have a comment, speak up. If not, then if I hear no one speaks, then we'll assume that the consensus is that is not, that it conforms to the standard. Any concerns on that? Number 3, the special use will be designed, constructed, operated, and maintained in a manner compatible with adjacent uses, the surrounding area, and the intent of the zoning district. Where determined necessary by the planning commission or township board, the applicant has provided adequately for any restrictions on hours or days of operation, minimization of noise, and screening improvements or other land use buffers to ensure land use compatibility and minimize adverse impacts. know the, special use is separate from the site plan, but we look at the site plan to kind of get an idea of what the thing is going to look like and those sorts of things. I'm looking at the site plan, it looks to me like the entire thing is going to be more or less surrounded by trees. Am I looking at that right, on all sides? Because I have to say, my first reaction when I saw this was, you know, they just had the article in the paper about how they're redoing and you know, the mobile home park is essentially being reimagined and redeveloped, and, you know, they want to make that a nice place to live and all that stuff. And this sits immediately in front of that, so this is what people are going to be seeing when they come in from Mission. So, you know, we want it to look at it as nice as it possibly can. So I'm pleased to see the amount of proposed trees this spring. We have the question about hours of operation. Sounds like it's going to be 24/7, but with gated entry. Any comments or concerns on number 3? Okay. Number 4, the special use location and character is consistent with the general principles, goals, objectives, and policies of the adopted master plan. I'm looking at our future land use map. It's in what's called neighborhood services and stuff. I mean, I think the staff report mentioned it. I mean, it's probably not what would be one's first choice necessarily for that spot, but with a similar type of business already established across the street, it's hard to argue that it's out of character with what's in the surrounding area.
I would tend to agree on that. I think that there are there's high density residential community behind it. And, you know, it seems good on Broomfield. There's plenty more. I'd like to know at a later point, you know, in terms of looking at the master plan, because I do understand the reason why we're trying to avoid this sort of stuff we do before, but I think that in this particular area, given the existing residential that's there, as well as the use right across the street, certainly think it makes sense for this area, this parcel of land.
Other comments? Number 5, the proposed special use conforms to all applicable requirements or standards of this ordinance or other township ordinances. Staff report says Number 6, approval of the special use location will not result in a small residential or non-residential area being substantially surrounded by incompatible uses. I think we've established that that's not the case. And then lastly, the impact of the special use will not exceed the existing or planned capacity of public or municipal services or infrastructure, including but not limited to roads, police, and fire protection services, refuse disposal, municipal water and sewage systems, other utilities, drainage facilities, and public or private wells. The proposed use will not create additional requirements at public cost for services or infrastructure that will be detrimental to the economic welfare of the community. I guess if there's one thing you can say for self-storage facilities, they are relatively easy on that type of infrastructure. They're not highly demanding. Any comments on, any other comments on the checklist?
Yeah, I just got out of curiosity, and probably maybe you can get a sense of, our applicant here today said that there are, of the storage facilities in town, there are a couple that are gated. Well, I should say there are a couple that actually work, the gates work. What is, when you were looking at approving a special use, and I appreciate that, having a gated storage facility like this is intended to keep the people that are reasonably there, and certainly from an applicant standpoint, having a gate for the same reason, having people that are supposed to be there. Is there any, do municipalities, like if we're approving a special use, is there any enforcement of like, hearing the gates, some gates are just not working, they're just open. Is there any enforcement of, well, hey, if that breaks, you have to fix it? How does that work?
So the township can enforce an approved site plan. The approved site plan says that there are going to be locked gates on this property. They're going to be operated by whatever means. If it went into that level of detail, and the gates are no longer in operation, they're open, the site is unsecured, yes, that could be enforced through the ordinance enforcement process. It would not be something we'd be, when they issue tickets on, or like that, but we'd be basically reminding the operator, here's an approved site plan, here's what you said you were going to do. Any approved site plan essentially becomes a part of the zoning ordinance for terms of the ordinance. This is how this site will be used. Most site plans for mini storage do not address that issue. So I would not expect to find that on the local plan. From the perspective of are gates good for mini storage, absolutely. It makes a big difference for the consumer. Just from a personal point of view, when my wife was looking around at mini storage, when we needed a unit for a period of time, and this was something she took on. The fact that there was a gated system and she had a key and lock it behind her and knew that she was in a secured space made all the difference to her. It made less difference to me. That's the difference between a 5'3" woman and a 6'2" man. It made a huge difference to her, and I understand exactly why. And in that sense, it also was important to me because I knew that she was safe when she was over there. But it typically is not an ordinance requirement, so it won't be enforced if it's on the site plan explicitly.
other questions?
I have a question. Earlier it was stated that that the light units throughout the township are 24 hours. Is that because one condition is verification of hours of operation? So is that standard, that it's 24 hours, or is that, what's required? That's the question related to hours of operation. I know the precedent of what businesses are currently doing, but what's the expectation of the township?
So this item came up because of the special use standard that referenced hours and compatibility with the neighborhood. That's the only reason it came up. And so we simply asked that the applicant note on the final site plan what the hours are. You have the ability as a planning commission to limit hours if you feel that that's necessary to be consistent with the special use standards. There's no specific restriction for self-storage in the ordinance within the hours of operation. So as a 24-hour site, from that perspective, is compatible with ordinance as long as you feel it's compatible with that standard number 3.
Thank you. And this might be more for the applicant, but in terms of having hours of operation, in reality, what hours of operation means is your ability to get a vehicle through the gate, right? It's not walled, so anybody that's using that facility from the immediate residential district could just walk into it anyways. Is that correct or not?
It's
Oh, it's fenced, I'm sorry.
With our facility, it'd be
Right.
right. I mean, anybody that wants to get in can get in if they want to get in there. But, we set it up as secure as possible, security cameras, fully fenced, and a gate that operates. I've been in the self-storage business for 18 years, and I don't know of a location that's not 24 hours. I have a location in Honolulu, one of the estimates that I just sold, and I'm looking at rebuilding here in Mount Pleasant.
Well, that was kind of my thought, that if the immediate residents wanted to be in, regardless if there's hours on your map, how are you going to find a way?
Yeah, anybody with legal intent will find a way, but this keeps things more honest, just like black and white.
Other questions?
I'd like to make a motion to approve ESPP 22-02, special use permit application for a self-storage facility at 5242 South Vision Road, northwest corner of section 34, in the B4 General Business Zoning District, finding that I can comply with section 14.3.J, standards for special use approval subject to the following conditions. Number 1, verification of hours and days of operation and the final site plan.
Mark? The motion was made by LaBelle, with the second by Darren. Further discussion?
Well, I think that you might have mentioned northwest, it should be northeast. Is that, or did I hear wrong? It should be in the northeast quarter of section 34. I think maybe I heard southwest, maybe I was wrong.
If I did,
Yeah.
northeast should be the correct one, if that's what I said.
I'm assuming that what ends up in the minutes is what's on the page and not what's in front of our mouth.
We will put what you said. So if you change something, we put what you said. So it definitely is worth
We
it.
do.
Yeah, I did say northwest and whatever, it should be northeast.
I wasn't sure if she could write that down. Okay, yeah, we want to make sure it's correct. So it is the northeast quarter of section 34. And so again, this is our first, but this is, under the new ordinance, we are approving, it's not a recommendation of the township board, we are approving the special use permit. Further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Say no. Hearing none, motion approved without dissent. So that is approved. So then, having approved the special use permit, then we move on to the preliminary site plan application. So you have that in your packet as well. And so again, I'll turn it over to Rodney for presentation, and then we will hear from Mr. Beebe, and then we will, if he wants to say anything else, then we move on to our consideration.
Thank you. Everybody should have a copy of our report dated March the 8th, 2022, on the preliminary site plan. As we talked about before, our site plan process is divided into two parts. We have preliminary site plan approval and final site plan approval. The preliminary is somewhat conceptual in character. Not all the engineering has been done. The outside agencies, roads, and others have not necessarily been fully consulted yet. So this is your first opportunity to comment on the plan. Following preliminary site plan approval, that's granted. The applicant is required to go out and deal with the outside agencies, take care of all the engineering, and come back to you with the final site plan, which is essentially, this is the plan that they're going to construct at that stage. So what we're looking at tonight is the preliminary, and we're looking at plan dated February 16th. As you'll note in our report, there are a few details that we're not addressed. These are not significant concerns. We noted them essentially to say that they need to be taken care of on the final site plan. There's some calculations for parking, some information about the buildings that need to be taken care of. But all those can easily be taken care of and brought back to the final site plan. They don't affect the overall layout of the site. And so, with the exception of those details, your company is recommending this project for approval. So we've recommended it for approval as that answers your questions. Okay, thank you.
Any introductory remarks that you all want to make before we move on to this?
Details on page one.
Did you say 4?
Yep, page 4, lower right corner. That page was specifically put in there just to show that you can park vehicles at the storage units and still have your fire lane, 20-foot fire lane to get in and through. That's why buildings are set at 30 feet between, so that there's access in and around, and you can park. You can actually have a number of cars in that facility all at the same time. Typically, you don't think of parking per se, like a parking lot or a storage unit facility. It's not as though you're going to go into a parking lot and then carry your stuff to the other end of the building. But again, you drive up to the door, you park next to the facility, you open up, put in and take out, and then you drive out. So, parking requirements was kind of a curious thing. The idea of putting a 30 or 40 car parking lot isn't really what you do with a storage facility. So we tried to show that there's that amount of parking throughout the development.
If I may, that topic, what I would suggest for the final site plan is just add a note that that's a proposed modification. Because it's not really how parking layout, the ordinance allows for parking. I don't we have any objection to it at all. But I just noted as a modification and why on the site plan.
You don't disagree that a 40 stall parking facility off to the side, no one's going to use.
I don't recommend that we have parking developed that's never going to be used. It doesn't make any sense.
Right.
But just noted as modification.
So again, it's open, it's on the floor, open for questions or comments from the commissioners.
I don't want to get ahead of ourselves, if anybody has any concerns or anything, but we did just approve a special use for this, and we are in the preliminary site plans phase. So I just like to make a motion to approve. The motion to approve PSPR 2203 preliminary site plan for full self-storage facility at 252 South Mission Road in the northeast quarter of section 34 and the Genesis District and site plan dated February 16, 2022, fully complies with the applicable zoning ordinance requirements for preliminary site plan approval, including sections 14.2.e, right site plan information 14.2.s, standards, floor, site plan approval.
Okay, so the motion was made by Buckley, the second by Lapp, to approve the preliminary site plan as is. Further discussion? I was going to ask one thing. The retention pond. You mentioned the south portion of the property has some hill to it, it's not flat.
That it drops off. We're actually using that drop off so that the land slopes down. We put a berm across and it actually catches the water and we reshape that area. So you can build a detention pond without actually digging a lot out.
Okay. But you're talking about the one that's actually shown, the
Yes.
rectangle.
Yep.
But I guess my question was going to be, and I have to admit, I have not gone out and walked this property. I guess I felt like I was familiar enough with the area, but is the slope of the south 35% or ish of the property that's not being developed, is that towards the part that is being developed? In other words, does it slope down towards the north, or does it slope in some other direction?
It primarily slopes to the north and east.
So then that detention pond would be storing water that comes not just from the paved area of the development, but also from that other.
The grading, well, you'll have grass and discharge, natural drainage.
What is it good to? 100-year flood?
Like a detention pond?
Yeah.
The way we typically design is 25-year with a minimum of 1 foot of freeboard. That 1 foot of freeboard gives you the ability to store 100-year stone.
Anything else? We do have a motion on the floor to approve. If there's no further discussion, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? variance. So we look forward to seeing the final site plan in the near future.
Thank you, everyone.
The next item is also a special use permit application, PSUP 22-01, which is for a proposed agritourism farm market operation at 5297 South Lakeville Road. And this one, that's a little more complicated, so we'll turn it over to Rodney for introduction. Let us know where it stands and what we're supposed to be doing with this.
Well, everybody should have a copy of our report dated March the 8th. This is another special use application. It's what the word is called agritourism facility. This is a farm property on South Lakeville. Proposing to add some opportunities for the public to be on the property for various things, the farm market, and some other activities. We did review this application and found that there were a number of items of information that were missing, both related to the special use permit and also the site plan, for the preliminary site plan component of it. You'll see those noted in our report, areas where there's no more information needed. There are a couple of elements where the applicant would either has or going to need to potentially make a request to the planning commission. The parking lot paving, lighting, and potentially, I think, landscaping is the third one. These are all sections where our ordinance for agritourism allows the planning commission to grant certain waivers. For example, allowing at least partially the gravel parking lot rather than a paved parking lot for agritourism facility. In that particular case, for example, even if you were to allow a gravel parking lot, the applicant would still be required to pave the area-free access, area-free parking spaces, and access to the building and all that to be paved. But that does allow you to approve a gravel lot for the remainder. So, as I said, essentially there's some items of information that are not available. There were enough of those, we felt that the project was not ready for a public hearing. There are potential things that may change the site design or at least provide more clarity. And so we included on the agenda both to give the applicant an opportunity to introduce the project. It's a very interesting project, it's a very interesting site. But also so that you would have the opportunity to kind of give some early direction if you chose on specific issues or maybe get questions answered that could then be addressed on updated plans to come back before you for a hearing at a future meeting. So that's why it's on the agenda. We did, the only item on the agenda is a special use permit, but we did include our preliminary site plan review, just so for information purposes, both for you and for the applicant, so those details can get addressed as well.
So you did not, this was where I was slightly unclear, I guess, but this was not scheduled as a public hearing. There was no notifications were sent out, wasn't in the paper, any of that stuff. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay.
It's simply on here for your review and for the applicant's presentation. The public hearing is not yet scheduled.
Okay. All right, very good. Any questions for Rodney? So, thank you. Get your steps in tonight, go back and forth. All right, so you've heard that, so it actually is not going to proceed with a public hearing tonight, but we do want to give it consideration in terms of our reaction and thoughts and whatnot. But so at this point, I will ask, I guess it's going to be Mr. Beebe also. Do you have things you want to say about this one?
Just real quickly, Tim Beebe, Central Michigan Surveying, 2257 Broomfield Road. Actually, getting this review, I sat down with the owner, it's his wife that is looking at operating this. And it actually made them look a little bit larger. I said, you know, they said, you're asking for a special use, no? Where do you see this thing going? So I said, is this it? Is this all you're ever gonna ask for? He said, no, probably want to build a greenhouse so we can get the crops started, you know, the seedlings started early. Probably want, I said, you gotta sit down and you gotta think through this. And why don't you sit down and realize where would you like to see this go? They want to plant tulip fields so that there's opportunities for photography, so that people can come out and take pictures and get the flowers as they bloom. So they're working on that. So what overall scope? So things are going to be changing as we put this in. But it gave items for them to focus on, which I think they came at this in a rush. And she is all excited. But I think this is slowing them down so that they can think through the entire process. So I gave them their checklist of work items that they need to do. I have review comments from staff on the special use on the site plan. We really weren't turning in site plan approval. It was to have a plan to show what they were telling me they wanted for the special use. So before we come back, hopefully we'll have the members focused and a 5-year plan put together on where they expect to see this lower practices. Happy to answer any questions that you might have. Would love to hear any thoughts that you have that we can incorporate. So, thank you.
Those open for questions or comments. I thought it looked really cool. I think it's one of the nicer ideas that I've seen come down the pipe, and just from the standpoint of something that I might want to go to. And drive down Whiteville. It's actually not far from where we live. You know, most of us live on the west side of the township. So, pleased to see.
I really like the project. I think it sounds really cool. I am curious, but you mentioned that in terms of for the agritourism, section 3.6, that there is an avenue for waiving pavement in terms of, how does that work? And I'm doing this now just to make you walking.
I appreciate that. As I said, I keep mentioning that people ask me why I park in the upper parking lot in Township Hall, it's because it's the only exercise I get while you do. So basically, it's part of the agritourism section of the ordinance that provides that opportunity. It's actually, if you look at our report, it's on page 50 of your packet. Item F up at the top there. It just has language that says parking shall comply with section 9, which is parking standards, except that the planning commission may waive parking lot landscaping. And before that is parking lot lighting, and the item before that, on page 49, is parking lot pavement, ground pavement. So you have 3 elements related to the parking lot where you have the ability to essentially approve a site plan that has something different than the standards that apply to other commercial parking lots.
Oh, okay, so what I was wondering is that something we had to address in a special use, or is that something that can be done at the site plan level then? It sounds like it's site plan.
Yes, it could be addressed in the site plan. I would recommend that you have a site plan in front of you. It's something you could address as part of the preliminary site plan approval. What I would recommend to the applicant is that they put their waivers on the preliminary site plan, the reasons why and what they'd like to do. And that way you could take action as part of the preliminary site plan decision, such as say, yes, we like that, would we accept that, or say no. And then they can obviously make any adjustments on the final site plan.
the township staff counsel them if there was an expectation of something between gravel and pavement? Semi-permeable. You guys would be advising them on that prior to bringing cuts. It's not one or the other necessarily. You could be able to give the counsel them on the applicant on that. Or?
So it's an interesting question. I've dealt with this issue before in other communities with agritourism facilities. It's very common that they want to use gravel. It's becoming very, very common that they want to use asphalt millings. And so that's the in-between. Although it will come if we use asphalt millings, will come back from height down. Tim is the engineer. I'm not an engineer. I'm no fan of asphalt millings. They tend to wander. Even how much you compact them, they tend to wander around in ruts and things happen. But so in terms of a durable surface, gravel surfaces, it's all how you prepare the surface. So that's up to Tim to put the best plan together. I have no doubt that we can do that. The actual surface, the ordinance simply says gravel. Asphalt millings would meet that, I would say. But the engineer would be expected to show how that surface is going to be durable and is not going to cause trouble later. The main key is, as I said, there is no option to waive that payment. So the access to the building and very free parking is going to be taken.
Is it, I guess, assumed that it's gonna basically run from like the spring till the fall in terms of operation? Or are they, are they gonna be year round? Like with their events that they are interested in?
What they discussed today, and that was part of getting them to focus on what are you actually doing. So are you open year round? Well, no. So, well, no. And the latest that they would be open would be 2 Thanksgiving. Because their pumpkins and things of that sort still going on during that period of time. The earliest that they'd be opening up would be the 1st of April. But the only way that they can do that is if they have a greenhouse, and that's how the greenhouse came up. Well, we could, getting things started earlier and having flowers and things that people could come in and get. So that's what got them thinking. And then we talked about the lighting. They said, well, we're not going to be open in the park. What are you thinking of the others? They said, well, geez, the staff might show up at 7 o'clock. We're not going to be open to the public until after 8. And probably 6, 7 o'clock at night. During the time that they're talking about doing this, you have daylight. So, and that's part of the waivers that Roger was talking about. If you could show and limit your activities to daylight hours, you need to have parking lot lighting. You need to have wall packs outdoors. You need to have things that the building requires. But those are the things that they got sent back to sit down and decide. But that's the direction that they told me today.
Well, you want to really keep your eyes on the Congress here. The U.S. Senate just passed unanimously to make the permanent daylight savings. I don't know if everybody heard that. And hold on to that. I'm curious. I thought I read some mention of, some wholesale products and things like that. Would there be business operations going on that would not necessarily be open to the retail public during the off months, or is that?
What she was telling me today was that during that period of time, it would be closed down. But
I would be curious. Yeah, I would be curious just to maybe clarify on that in terms of, as we're talking about what hours are, if there were through the winter months or something like that, some sort of like business to business type of sales or operations where it's not necessarily open to the general public, but I'd be curious as to what that might look like if there were hours.
I'm kind of curious to hear that.
If they come in that, one thing to keep in mind is that the special use, the site plan are only for the agritourism activity. So this is the public coming in, whatever it might be, farm market, whatever those the elements are under the agritourism definition. This is a commercial agricultural site. There's a lot of other things going on this property. If you read the Epicenter, the online newspaper, Epicenter, Mount Pleasant, there's a very nice article. So if you search it, Epicenter, you can see some of what is going on in this property. So it has a full-scale operation, commercial agriculture that is not affected by this. It can have whatever hours it has. So that's just something to keep in mind. So things like this, business sales, where you might be selling to restaurants or whatever, food, all that is part of the commercial agriculture operation.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
So then, based on what Tim said in terms of where the application is, I guess I'm just wondering, at first I thought, okay, maybe we're essentially postponing this until next month to give them a chance to respond to the questions, but it sounds to me like this is maybe a longer term sort of thing.
I don't know. It's all based on that. So it depends on how quickly they get back. One of the items that he needed to do was come in and sit down with the building inspector and talk about, because there's items in here about bathrooms. Bathrooms are based on capacity. And he needs to show the building inspector how things are going to be set up inside, how much room is actually in aisleways, what the physical capacity is, because that sets the bathroom count. The bathroom count sets my septic system, determined through the health department. So he's got some work to do. Is he going to get it done in time for next meeting? I don't know.
The proposed motion does not have a date on it. We just had a thought in mind that it might take a little longer. So it was raised basically postponed with the request for updated plan.
Okay. Well, are there any other questions or comments while the applicant representative is here? Well, we can proceed to a motion.
Well, I make a motion to postpone PSPR 22-02 preliminary site plan application. The necessary changes have been made and revised preliminary site plan. We, the minimum required zoning ordinance, have been submitted for review.
You're reading a different motion. I thought we were doing the special use.
Yeah, I think it's,
Page 52.
well, this is that same package, but it's, it should be PSUP 22-01.
Right.
Yeah, just it's in our recommendations.
But weren't you reading a motion that pertained to the site plan?
Yes, actually it was.
So I was thinking we would have.
I'm on,
It's 52 of the.
yeah, I was on 56. 22.
That's the next question.
Yeah. I was on the wrong one.
Obviously, this is
My mistake. I'll start over.
Motion to postpone action on PSUP 22-01 special use permit application for the proposed Heirloom Grove agritourism business located at 5297 South Whiteville Road for the request for submittal of an updated special use permit and associated preliminary site plan for further review for the following reasons. Number one, as presented, the special use permit application is incomplete and not ready for a public hearing or final planning commission action. Number two, key information required in section 6.51 agritourism of the zoning ordinance is missing from the application.
Okay, is there a second? So the motion was by LaBelle, second by Albrecht. Further discussion? We're basically just postponing until they come back to us. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
We look forward to seeing you back.
Good catch, Chair. Reading out for all of
So then, the next item, so now we move on to other business, so these are things we've dealt with before, but are coming back to us. So this is rezone request, PREZ 21-03, the planned unit development for the Prestige Center Assisted Living Facility expansion. You have a letter in the packets from Tim Smith to the applicant, and Rodney will brief us on that, and we'll go from there.
Thank you. So this item's on your agenda because it was, you reviewed it in January and it was postponed to this meeting. The applicant at the time expected to be ready to be on this agenda for public hearing. As you see from this note, they were working with Kim Smith, our Public Services Department, to try to address concerns about sewer capacity. In the end, Kim essentially said that the phase 2 part of the project, this was the independent senior housing building that was proposed. There was simply no capacity in the system to allow for that. She did note, as it says here, that the phase 1 project, that there is capacity for that proposed expansion of the assisted living and memory care component of what they were proposing to do. The applicant is regrouping on this. I just actually received word today that they have made the decision to amend the plan, basically come back with only the phase 1 portion. The phase 2 would be simply noted as green space, part of the open space of the project, future development area, something to that effect, but there would be no phase 2 development. So I'm expecting to see those updated plans shortly. We did review the plan they provided, and provided some comments. Most of the comments are very about phase 2 from the zoning perspective as well. So I expect that we will be able to have this as a hearing item under April agenda, based on where they're headed. It would continue forward as PUD, but basically eliminate the phase 2 portion. So for today, as I said, this was postponed to this meeting. So we simply recommend a new postponement action, but this time nobody significantly addressed the concerns in Christmas letter, which they, as they do intend to take care of, come back and get it.
Very good. Any questions for Rodney? So we have that motion as well, so we can have a motion to postpone.
I did call Smith before the meeting just to kind of see if I can get a little more detail about, the future, and just talk about the wastewater system. And she had mentioned that when they're looking at the system that they have, it's based on how properties are zoned, not, what they could be. So if a project comes in and a special use permit comes in or whatever, it gets rezoned or however you want to do it, and it requires more, well then they have to look at ways of improving that, be it themselves or the applicant gets involved. So it's the way things are set up are based on how things are zoned today. I was just kind of thinking, they are always thinking in the future. But right now, based on how that area is zoned, it's adequate for what it has, what it's used for.
This is a topic that, again, another one that I recommend that we look at as part of next time we look at the master plan. Our 5-year review, we're required by the state planning act to review the master plan at least every 5 years. We don't have to update it, we choose not to. But we need to at least review it in the planning commission and have some kind of an action. Either say, yes, we like it, or no, we need to update it. As part of the 5-year review, which is actually next year, I would suggest we look at because it is something that's worth considering. From a land use perspective, but also part of that, then we'd be looking at from an infrastructure perspective, where should we be targeting updates? Part of the challenge we have here is we're actually in the midst right now of expanding the sewage treatment, pumping station that would serve this facility. That's a project that the CDA district's been involved in. And the expansion is to cover the industrial park that is north of this site. And some expanded development there. There's some vacant or underutilized land in that area that was not originally planned for when the current pump station was installed. So, like I said, it's a bad time to propose another expansion because we're literally getting ready to construct the expansion and design all of the rest of the site. So, like I said, from a master plan perspective, this is another topic that I made note of, and I've recommended that we look at it from that longer range policy perspective.
So just to clarify, next year, which I would have guessed in 4 years before, next year you'll have a list of like, hey, these are the same things we discussed. I'm already losing track of time, but you would have that list for us that you can pick up on.
I made some notes, I guess, as we go along. And look, we could start the master plan review and discussion at any time. The 5 years is just what the ordinance, or what the state act requires us to do. But it's something the plan can be updated and amended, reviewed at any time. I actually recommend all the commissioners take a look at it. Look at it from the perspective of, is this really serving us? Because it is intended to be a guide for future development, certainly a guide for rezoning, it's a guide for infrastructure, as you heard. And so it is a document that really doesn't need to be what we want it to be, to say that this is what we want our community to be like 5, 10, 20 years from now. So it's not quite serving that to the opportunity to make some changes.
Sorry, I represent the applicant. Can I just make a comment that's maybe not exactly related to our application?
Yeah.
So your comment about the Kim's letter and your comment about the master plan review. I would just encourage you guys as you're looking at that to really dig into what the utilities will support. The 100 additional units of independent living represent less than 3% of an 8-inch sanitary line. And that's why we're that phase 2 is being shut down. Honestly, it's probably fine, right? But 3% of an 8-inch pipe is not much to ask for. So as you go through this process and you review that process, please get buy-in from the other directors to make sure that what you're saying in zoning wise and in the master plan can actually be supported by the system. 3% of an 8-inch pipe, not much. Thank you.
So, I remember looking at things like this before where you have phases. Could they come back with a plan which still has phase 1, phase 2, and simply say, we're not going to build phase 2?
That question was asked. We had a meeting with the applicant's team, and that was one of the questions. Can we have some sort of conditional approval? And PUD is a rezoning. It establishes the allowable land uses on the property. And it did not seem like a good idea to approve a land use that cannot actually be supported by the infrastructure that's in place. The equivalent of allowing a Walmart in a location where there are roads. It's a simple idea. And so recommended that they don't even propose that. They could have come to you and said, this is what we want to do, but our recommendation is that
Yeah. If it were a special use, it would perhaps make more sense to do it that way?
Well, the same problem arises though. If you're granting approval of a use that, for which they cannot establish it because there's no infrastructure to support it. So I think it would be the same thing if this was allowed as a special use on that site. With the infrastructure, what the standards for infrastructure is, does it impose a burden on public infrastructure, water, sewer, roads, and everything. So I think they would have that same challenge. Essentially what they'd be doing if they do come back is, as I said, with the phase one part of this project, and leaving that area as open space and future development, undefined, whatever. They could come back and amend the PUD in the future. That's really what happens. But if the infrastructure is supported in the future, they would simply come back to you and apply for an amendment to the PUD. It would follow the same process as the new, its current action, public hearing and all the steps, but they absolutely can amend it in the future if they choose. If the infrastructure supports it at that time. I understand the comment, you mentioned here about capacity. We have very limited industrial land available. It happens to be the property north of this, the land north of this particular is our primary industrial area. And so we do have to absolutely be careful to ensure that we have adequate capacity for any activities are allowed in that industrial district. Because there is interest. We have this, Jim McBride from the Michigan Development Corporation would tell you, if he was here, that he has to turn projects away because we don't have land that can support the project. So we're always trying to maximize the suitability and the capacity of this particular area that's industrial around Enterprise Drive. And that's part of why Kim Smith is saying what she's saying in that letter, is that capacity is reserved for the property that the uses are intended on in existing zoning industrial area. What down the road? That's a good question. Certainly, it's possible to expand the pumping station further. It's certainly possible to lay additional pipe. All of that is cost. All of that takes time. And it's like I said, something I think that is best looked at first from a policy perspective as part of that. We certainly would be bringing in the utility element to that as to what the function is as part of the discussion.
I'm just curious, and maybe I misunderstood. Jim McBride is saying we're turning away projects because of anticipating what's down the road.
No. What we have challenges with is we get, first of all, any regional economic development agency is constantly receiving requests from site selectors, or many of them come to the state of Michigan, the MEDC, where they're getting national requests from site selectors looking for X number of acres with this configuration, with this access to the freeway, with these utilities for a whatever size building, industrial, manufacturing, pilot application, whatever it might be. The requests vary. Each project is unique. Many of them require a minimum acreage that is larger than what we have available in our existing industrial and zone area. The challenge we have is that, as I said, we want to make sure that that land is available where we can get a project that happens. We don't want to run into the issue where we have a project that can come in and land is zoned for it, and suddenly we have a lack of capacity in our sewer system to support that activity that's zoned, that's allowed in that zoning district. So essentially, there's a certain amount of capacity to reserve for that industrial district. But if we call that a certain number of inches of that 8-inch pipe, that's essentially what Kim Smith is talking about, that she has to preserve the capacity for what she already knows that property is zoned for the industrial.
So we would discourage is the wrong word, but we would maybe not really approve something like this in anticipation of what might come later. That could be 20 years from now, or whatever the time frame is.
The difference between what we're talking about here and the the land is zoned industrial, is that somebody can come in on that land zoned industrial and simply go through the site plan approval process. An activity where it can meet the requirements for site plan approval, the state act and our ordinance say you must approve the site plan. This is PUD is an optional form of development. It is often used exactly this way. Somebody doesn't quite fit in the district, but nonetheless could be an attractive project. From a perspective of mix of uses, we have an existing assisted living facility. On the site, it's older, it dates back to the 80s. It's certainly not up to current specifications for that type of activity. It needs to be modernized. Modernizing makes perfect sense. The new addition they're proposing, modernizing the existing building and converting to memory care, all those things are very logical with today's type of expectation for senior housing, elderly housing. The other thing that makes sense logically is the range of activities where you have independent, assisted, and memory care, so that people can stay in the same location as their needs change, especially couples where maybe one the spouse needs memory care, but the husband or wife or whatever the other spouse can live independently. So they can be in the same environment. All of that makes very good sense, and that's why when we came to the township and sat down with us and said we'd like to propose this, we suggested that they pursue a new development and propose it, essentially bring it to you and say, what about, what do you think? But we just as if there were no roads there, in this particular case, there's no infrastructure there, the sewer capacity, then that part of the project, in this case, independent senior housing, no longer makes sense. We can't support it right now. The applicant has the option to propose to build what needs to be built to support it. They can come as part of the PUD and say, we'll do what we need to do. We'll lay the bigger pipe. We'll improve the pumping station. That can be part of a PUD. It can be part of a development agreement between the township and the developer, and all could get done. That, of course, has to be financial sense to the applicant. I speak for the applicant here, but they're proposing something different, so I assume that it doesn't make financial sense.
So just a couple of questions. One, and again, maybe I misunderstood that if we were to rezone this and approve the project with phase 1 and phase 2, there's not enough capacity currently to handle that, is the way this letter's worded.
The way the letter's worded is that there is capacity to handle the phase 1 expansion,
right,
but not the phase 2 portion of the project.
Okay, so there's not enough for phase 2, so if industrial comes in, probably won't be enough to support that either.
As I said, Kim Smith and as she says, she has to plan for what the property is intended for under the zoning. So she is planning for capacity to be available to serve current and future industrial uses on the property elsewhere. Basically, what's currently planned for.
Right, I get that, but currently there would be enough for phase 1 and phase 2 currently. If you're not anticipating.
I'm not going to go beyond what Kim Smith said. I understand your point, but I'm not going to go.
No, I understand. You're kind of working around it.
But for a good reason.
So my second question is, if we were to approve this, just hypothetically, and you go to the industrial and now somebody, we can't put any, like you said, if it meets it, we just have to approve it. And if we did so without anticipating the usage, at that point, we've got an issue that we can't handle phase 1, phase 2, and this industrial, because that's kind of what I'm gathering from all this.
Yeah, you're essentially saying, well, let them take the capacity down, and later on, the problem will come up later on the other side.
Well, yeah, I'm just saying is, because you addressed it that, well, if it meets all the qualifications, we just have to approve it, and if there's not enough infrastructure there to support this hypothetical project down the road, that we would have a major issue with who addresses that. Is it the applicant at that time, or is it the township?
We would have a major issue, yes. It's something that we're avoiding by making sure to.
We probably would have an applicant. If we didn't have capacity, the applicant probably would
Well, potentially.
Yeah, I don't know if I would go that direction. But the key is really that we do have to deal with the property that is planned to go to industrial, make sure the capacity is there. Industrial is a very broad set of activities. Some require a lot of sewer capacity, some don't require much at all. But we have to plan for as if we're going to have an activity that is going to need that capacity. What I told the applicant was, Ms. Smith knows her system. She's very experienced and she knows what she has to work with. If she could have said yes to this, she would have said yes to it. If there's capacity there, she would have said there's capacity there, and it would have certainly down the road, are there opportunities to look at this issue again? Absolutely. I recommended to the engineer that if he would like to explore the very topics he mentioned to you tonight, that we should do that with the Public Services Department and see the data that he's looking for to try to show that there is capacity. That's between the engineers in this case. And I would leave it there. Other than, I suppose, support what Kim Smith said. She says there's no capacity for phase two, and there's no capacity for phase two, and it needs to be adjusted.
Yeah, and I don't discount what she's saying. I mean, she knows what she's doing. I don't. That's why I'm asking the question.
It's probably some business. So, for example, if that other half of the site, instead of being a 4-story independent senior living facility, it became a CVS pharmacy. So CVS pharmacy has far lower sewer fees. Simply a full bathroom. It's not much more than that. And so that capacity, that's the plan she has essentially for the site, is a business use that has a lower expectation or a lower need for sewer. Down the road, it could change.
Yeah, I guess from a community aspect of it, I'm sitting here thinking, okay, we have people that are willing to spend money in our community. That would create tax base. That would benefit, bring more jobs potentially. And we're turning them away in a sense, not completely, because they can do phase one, but we're turning it away as it's in its entirety because of what we're just trying to plan ahead. So I kind of look at, we've got one in our hand and none in the bush, and we're just waiting on the one in the bush.
I disagree with the idea that there's...
Yeah, and I'm just saying this is what it appears to it. And I have a hard time with that. Being a developer, I have a hard time with that.
The other thing is that there are plenty of sites in the township where this facility, as proposed, could be put in right now with site plan. And if there are areas where the sewer is not an issue, where there is capacity existing in plan to support exactly what is proposed. So it just happens to be that this site is not planned for this activity. So that's why the PUD was the option to look at. There's certainly, as I said, good reason to look at it. An opportunity to improve that existing assisted living. It's great. We'd like to see that modernized and improved. It's there. It's not going away. There's private infrastructure there that they're not simply going to abandon. And so seeing it improve and make better use of it and obviously provide better services to the residents has real value. But from a perspective of development, there are actually quite a few other sites. I was actually talking with a realtor today, looking at other piece of property and asking about what are the options. And they were really kicking tires, and so they sort of had a list. But on that list was very expensive senior housing. They're just kind of looking, what could we do? Property's actually zoned for that. The various things that multiple families, including senior housing, that they're on that list. And simply go through the site plan process and get approved. So there are places where right now it happens that this is not a good one. But there are certainly other areas of the township where we're not far away from the site where it happen without any of those limitations.
That's why I called Kim, Doug, that was my question exactly. Working at a factory that was gonna bring in 200 jobs, what would we have to do? And anyway, based on the conversation, my interpretation, my conversation with Kim, is that phase two would not be, it could not handle phase two. Now, I took that as, that's it, that would be more than capacity, no matter what else went there. That's how I interpreted what she said. So I don't think there's like any reserve for something else to be there, like we're saving some of it for something else. I took it as phase two went in at the end.
It would already be maxed out, yeah,
That's how I interpreted
And
that.
I haven't spoken with her, so it would only be an assumption on my part. My assumption is that's probably not the case, that it could handle it currently, but it wouldn't be able to handle it if later down the road something was developed on the industrial property. That's the way I'm interpreting it, but again, until I physically talk to her and ask those specific questions, I can't say with any certainty.
That's, right,
Well,
I encourage you to call her.
And at the risk of kind of belaboring the point, though, I do see, certainly this is the point, this is why we're all here, right, is that, the planning commission is planning our community. And so when we talk about having a very scarce piece of zoning in our township that is industrial, we're talking about, well, how are we weighing the good and the bad, the benefit of preserving that industrial, which we do need, and people do want, absolutely, versus, taking advantage of an opportunity that's here on the table right now, despite the fact that there are plenty of additional potential sites for that type of use. And so, it's probably not an easy answer, but I look at it as, I would be hesitant to sacrifice any of our industrial property right now in rezoning. I know that, because we just don't have that much of it. That's why we're here, and the future of the community.
As I think I was understanding what you were sort of saying and not saying, it sounded to me like if we agree, or if the planning commission approved both phase 1 and 2, but then later on this other industrial thing came in and we had to approve that, then Union Township would get stuck with the bill for replacing all of that sewer lines because we had approved that all that was beyond the capacity of the current situation. Is that what you were implying?
Essentially, we provide a service. We provide public sewer, public water in this area. It happens that this facility is part of the older part of our system. It's been modernized and improved. It's actually one of the oldest sections of our system. But yes, we provide certain services, and in the industrial district, those services are essential to the success of projects and activities. But it's not really just the new project. Keep in mind that if we have a problem with rural capacity, the existing facilities there are not going to be able to operate. And we don't want to get into a situation where we're at 99% or even 95% of capacity, because if something goes wrong, then all of a sudden we have a problem. So this is not a 0-sum game where 3% is this, and so you have the other 97%. It's all about ensuring that no matter what, this system is going to operate. People don't think about it. So if you live in a city, if you live in Charter Township Union, if you live anywhere where you have municipal services, you expect when you run that sink, you're going to get clean water. If you expect when you flush that toilet, that dirty water is going to go somewhere else and be taken care of properly. And having seen the whole system, and I certainly recommend if there's ever an opportunity for the public tour of the sewage plant, it's very fascinating. I can talk to you about a few of them now. And ours is particularly interesting. At the end, the water goes to the river cleaner than the river water. But it's a lot of trouble to get to them. All of that is under the radar for people. They simply expect this would happen. And so protecting that capacity to ensure that expectation is met is important.
Well, and I guess to my point about when I said earlier that we might not see that applicant there, as it pertains to an industrial applicant, is unless I'm interpreting, if we are essentially fulfilling some of our capacity for a current build out versus saving that for the future, what that does, it sounds to me, is it changes the nature of the applicant that we even come to the table. Because if we're essentially, and by we I mean our economic development organizations at the local and state level, if we are essentially bidding out these opportunities to, national or regional and national types of businesses that are looking for siting locations, when we give them that kind of profile of this is what we have, we're giving them something to produce volume, which then further narrows the scope of the type of industrial type of business that can go there. Is that correct?
I'm not sure, quite sure I understood what you're saying. You're essentially saying that
if we're not reserving a certain level of capacity, that sewer capacity for the currently zoned industrial, and we forego that without expanding, and we say that we go with stage 1 and stage 2 here, then we don't have that capacity, that capacity that we would like to have for the industrial district. And therefore, that changes the type of industrial business that might be willing to locate there. You have now said we have a diminished capacity in sewer, which is one factor of many factors that goes into a site plan or a siting opportunity for any business. But it does, in a sense, further restrict the type of industrial business that might go there, that might be able to locate there.
it does, and it also would likely require us to look at that area, to look at, is this plan and zoned correctly? And maybe we need to make a change to what it's planned, because we looked at it. Earlier this evening, we heard a public comment from Mr. Young about Broomfield Road and Lincoln Road being a commercial corridor. And he was referring to essentially all commercial through there, suggesting certain things that should be actually planned or rezoned. Well, that area is not planned or zoned for a commercial corridor of the type that Mission Street is, or Grass or bigger. It has some commercial. There are commercial areas, and there's a lot of vacant land. But it doesn't have the capacity. It doesn't have the sewer and water in that sense that it can support a large-scale commercial development. None of that was planned for. None of that is part of the plan. I understand why what he may want it, and I respect him absolutely for advocating for it. But we do have to, looking at what we want our community to be like, both in the near term, which is what the zoning plan says, and the long term, which is what our future land use plan says in the master plan. We do need to look at those capacities and what makes sense. We're right now way over zone for commercial. We have, between Charter Township Union and the city of Mount Pleasant, we have far more commercial zoning than is warranted, based on the size, population, even with the population of students. Now, I'm not going to recommend to you that you take a wholesale change and get rid of all the commercial zoning. But we do have to recognize that we are way over zone. Things are changing. Issues related to retail, issues related to offices, how these things are going to come out in the future. COVID has had a big impact. But some of these things, like working from home, like Amazon and buying online, those changes were happening before COVID. They simply COVID accelerated. But it does then change for us what we should be looking at in terms of future plans for these areas. So that's a dynamic. I mean, communities are dynamic in nature, and that's why we review master plans. That's why master plans change. That's why zoning changes. Even in the case of the utility system, it is dynamic. It's constantly being worked on, evolved, expanded, adjusted. And so there may become time when this is a completely appropriate activity on that site. The base resources. It may not be right now. Just like, for example, there may come a time when it makes perfect sense to have a large-scale commercial facility on Lincoln Road at Broomfield Road. The time is not now. There's no capacity or infrastructure to support it. So you might have long-term planning for that, but that doesn't mean we're going to rezone the property. But it means that we don't have the infrastructure in place to be successful.
Good. So this has been a good discussion. The topic before us is essentially a postponement of action on this PUD rezoning request. We can have a motion if it's everyone's pleasure to make one.
make a motion to postpone action on the PRDZ 21-03, request to rezone parcels 14-013-20-043-02 and 043-08 at 5785 East Broadway Road from Leaf Village in the Business District or PUD for unit development until the municipal sewer system capacity concerns phase 2 project as identified in the Public Service Director's March 2nd, 2022 letter to be satisfactorily resolved by the applicant in a manner consistent with the township's established design requirements and specifications.
Second.
The motion was by Buckley, with the second by Williams. And further discussion. This one will be known henceforth as the long postponement.
I am sympathetic to the applicant because I think we all have agreed that it's a great project. So it is unfortunate that it's a road project.
Okay, so, further discussion. Not, then all in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed. Okay, so we hope to see that back at some point. And we have, one more agenda item that I think will require some, attention on our part more than just doing an announcement. And that is the, another look at the Parks and Recreation Master Plan survey, the Parks and Recreation survey that is part of the revision process of the Parks and Recreation Master Plan. So we looked at this last month. I believe we looked at it the month before that. So it is back to you with a few tweaks based on the discussion that we had last time. So I don't know if this is your final look at it, but you know, the goal is to move this towards final form. So, but there are some new eyes looking at it. So I open it up to any discussion or comments that you have for Rodney and Peter at this time.
Do we need a motion to accept this?
I think that it would really get goes if it was a consensus of the planning commission. We'll just give you your direction if you're comfortable with this. We'll move things ahead to try to get this out in the public.
You want to, my recollection is that the main things that were done were changing the number of boxes that could be checked in a couple of questions. Is that accurate?
Yes, yeah, question 5 and 6, we changed that to a fill-in. Before it had boxes for 1 to 5. The suggestions for going with this format is excellent. So it's a nice break. You always want to, one thing with surveys, you want to have a little variety. And so changing over to a fill-in can do that anyway. It works very well. On question 13, we reviewed the product facilities. Comments from my first stands comment on that. Question 14, I think there were a couple of adjustments to that. And question 16, we added in Twitter and Instagram to that list. So those were the key items, the key changes.
I'm comfortable with the current version of what we've got. I appreciate the changes that you included.
Any other comments? So it sounds like it's the consensus of the commission that this is good from our perspective, ready to move forward. Thank you. So is it accurate to say then that we'll further progress on the overall master plan revision is that waiting for the results of the survey to be in and reviewed and digested, et cetera? Or
I think we're going to have some more material for you, that essentially we're making technical changes. So we'll have some more material for you for next meeting. This meeting was pretty full, and so we'll give you much more than this element. But, yeah, certainly the policy elements of it, the elements that the survey is intended to try to get at, we are going to be working on those until we have some of this public participation, to start guiding where we might go. But there are technical things like the list of parks and the various pieces that are part of it that we really should update before the public has a chance to look at things. We need to make sure it's accurate. Similar to what we did with the administrative structure, the two pieces here.
so there's reading in your future.
I would recommend, like I said, master plan, excellent, well, actually, the zoning ordinance is excellent benchmark version, I've said that before. The master plan is good, evening, by the fire. It's not going to put you to sleep like the zoning ordinance will. But I do recommend, take a look at these documents. You establish the policy that underlies much of what we do. From a land use, with this parks element, from a long-term development. So we want these documents to be accurate to what, for today, what the needs are today, and what we want to have happen down the road. This planning commission has changed so much since the planning commission that adopted that project. The master plan. It certainly has changed the makeup of the prior body that did the Parks and Rec plan was a committee. That committee had one member that's still on this committee today, essentially for Parks and Rec plan. So it's very different, and so those perspectives are different, the priorities are different. So they're absolutely worth reading and thinking about and pondering what might need to be changed or modernized or updated.
Rodney, I have one question. I was going to save it for comment, but I don't want to delay the meeting any longer. But when we had that, in regards to the storage facilities, and you made a comment that, I understand why that special use is permitted before because of its existing in ordinance, its existence in the ordinance. And then you kind of made a comment that, well, we should probably consider that for our, for a larger review, not something we would want to take up and make that non-conforming. I guess I'm just, from a procedural standpoint, if there was a desire with that issue or any other, to say, oh, that is something we want to correct, because, sometimes we do see some things that, well, we want to work for the master plan. We could, in a situation like that, at the same time, we could take up that issue to correct it and also rezone that specific site to a conforming zoning district as well. Could we not? I don't know. I didn't mean to make.
No. I will do it so that the folks that are watching this will I want to make sure. But the answer to your question is absolutely yes. That the township can initiate a rezoning. We have, of course, when we adopted the zoning ordinance, we made some changes where we had to initiate some rezoning. We had a B6 business district that no longer was in the ordinance. And it was on our map. So yes, we absolutely could initiate a rezoning and rezone those properties to a different business district. And it is something that we may consider. It's an item on my list as I make my list. Peter and I are always making our list of these are things we need to think about, or these are things we might need to bring to the planning commission to ask about. We have a couple of other main storage facilities that are in the D4 that probably should be in a different zoning district. There's one that probably really ought to be industrial. It's directly adjacent to industrial. It's in the other area of the township that is industrial. That area does not have the infrastructure. I'll just make it clear, because we talk about we don't get a limited industrial. We you have enough area that has some vacant properties, but the roads are a mess, the utilities are not there. And so it can't really support the zoning. But bin storage makes perfect sense, for a place like that, it has relatively low impact, and low heat. But that property before, it would make perfect sense to make it. So yes, we can absolutely explore that if you as a planning commission decide you'd like to explore that particular issue. We can do the research to look at what would be the impact of making that change. Where would we need to rezone? And basically we would come to you with here's what we want, and you can decide what you'd like to do.
Well, I can say for myself that I would be interested in knowing what that impact is because, and not with any intent, I'm not trying to, prohibit any additional use or any additional expansion of mini storage, but we made that decision for a reason in our prior planning. And it's only by virtue of an oversight that it was not, that it was still there. So I guess my thought is that is one of those issues, if the intent was to make that change, that's one of those issues that I would say, well, let's take a look at fixing that, now that we're aware of it, as opposed to waiting until some sort of larger, planning conversation. So I would be interested in seeing at least what the impact would be.
And the main reason I suggest we do it as part of a local master plan is that there are other things that have may have equal value as well. We might as well take the broader approach and look at all of those issues. And so that would be my suggestion. I share that perspective. And if you as a planning commission decide that we would like to do that, certainly from a staff perspective, if you give us that direction, we like that information, we will gather it. But I think there's value in, like I said, doing it as part of the broader look at the community, look at the long-term plans. It would be beyond this book, particular use, this book, particular issue.
And the last question, it can be a one-sentence answer. Knowing that we're due to initiate master planning conversations by next year, when in reality does that process start? Would that start maybe this year? Would that not start until next year? When would we having that, initiating those conversations?
That is a great question. So the state law says you must open the master plan and look at it once per year. It doesn't require you to read it. It says you must look at it, review it, I think is actually what it says, whatever that means. And that you must make a passive motion that says, you like it, you think it's great, you're back on the shelf. Or a passive motion that says, you know what, I can't believe that this is our plan, this doesn't make any sense at all, we need to change this. And basically your motion would be, we need to update this, and you probably want to include something that recommended to the board of trustees that they include some money in the budget to get that. So that's what the law says. Now, and this has actually been adjudicated. The law has no penalty if you don't do it. There was actually a case, I don't remember the details now, there was a case that kind of tested that. Hey, but they didn't do that, they didn't look at it, or they in trouble. And the answer is no. There's absolutely no penalty if you don't. But there's great value in looking at it. Now, of course, you're looking at the master plan. I assume you read it, I assume that you occasionally open it up. I certainly saw you open, this will be opening up tonight as you were looking at these issues with special use. Exactly what it's for. Take a look at it. What did we mean? What did we say? What were we thinking? And so I certainly recommend to initiate the 5-year review process that the state law envisions can be done with a simple motion. My commission say, we want to initiate our 5-year review. And if you do it year 4, that's completely okay. And then we would just have that on the agenda. You have the opportunity to review it in whatever way you chose to. Section by section, topic by topic, area by area, and you can take as long as you want. That's the other element to this. That your 5-year review can start. Let's say it starts at the beginning of year 5. If it takes to the end of year 7 to complete that review, there's again no issue there, no penalty. There's quite frankly value in looking at over a longer period of time. So, basically, if you feel there's a need to start the review, I would recommend we do that. I have my list over here. Okay, I know that's a item that when that time comes, that I will bring you and say, these are some things that we should consider. I'll give you the short preview of that. That's really, some of these come from my background in economic development. I'm a land use planner by training. My first job was working for a county economic development agency, very similar to the Introductory Development Corporation. Economic development and the principles of economic development have been a part of who I am as a professional throughout my entire career. And one of the issues is industrial and business, these kind of employment center activities. We do need to look at where could we create a viable new industrial park operation that can be supported by the township, that's in the location where people, where site selectors need it based on the current criteria, what our expectations are for the future criteria. It's a topic on my list. It's a topic on Mr. McBride's list. When we're looking at that, I would want to invite Mr. McBride to give you an idea of what he's thinking, and so you can kind of get that perspective. That's just one item that we have on the list, essentially, of things that we should consider. Now, in the end, you may choose not to do it. It's just not right for this community. And that's completely okay too. Because this master plan is intended to be the guide for the future of this community. So that's it. This community, regardless of what some professional says you must do. My toolbox has a lot of tools in it. Some of them we use here, other ones just don't make any sense. And so that's why you are so important to the process, because you bring the perspective of what's best for this particular
Okay,
community.
thank you. Just as a point of information, the current master plan was approved by the Board of Trustees in February of 2018. So 5 years will be beginning of next year. And also a little bit of history. The previous master plan was from 2011. And so my guess is we probably began that 5-year review at the latest sometime in 2017, but it could have even been in the latter part of 2016. And it turned out to be a full rewrite. Even though the other one was only 5 years old, I guess tastes had changed, and there was let's modernize it, more readable, blah blah blah. And so a whole different consultant was hired, and it ended up being a pretty long, involved process. We'll see. I mean, obviously, we have and I was just looking at the thing on here of the folks who were on the commission. Or at least credited as being on the commission when this, for this latest one. The only ones that are still here are you and me. And everyone else is different. So there's going to be different perspectives and ideas, and we'll see what happens. All right. Last item, just to remind everyone, the joint meeting of all township boards and commissions is Wednesday, April 6th. You're all
7 p.m.
Yes, 7 p.m. at the Commission on Aging, which is just up here, nice big room. It's you're all invited. You don't have to come, but you're all invited. And as it points out on here, apparently the last one was in 2018. And what I remember of that one is that the chairs of the various bodies got up and gave little presentations, and then there's time for discussion. I've seen these, I've seen there be good discussion. I've seen them, I've been to some of these where it was a relatively short meeting. So it really depends on what's on people's minds and which direction the thing goes, and whether or not the supervisor, plans to guide the discussion or has ideas that he may want to talk about. But I would recommend it if you're free that night. I think it would be informative. But so anyway, that's coming up. And I will plan to have some, we're being recorded, so I don't want to say BS, but something to say, something to, talk about what we can do.
If I can just check something up, Brian Bill here, supervisor, is part of the DA board, which met here earlier today, this afternoon. And he, at the end of that meeting, the state a little blurb, that he mentioned that he would like to encourage the chairs, which I encourage you, to focus a significant part on your priorities for the future, things you, essentially things you would like to do, things that you're concerned about or interested in looking ahead.
I can do that. But like I said, once that kind of, that period in the meeting proceeds, then it's open discussion and, anybody can make comments and, raise concerns. So then we have, last item, extended public comment. Last two items, extended public comment. Anyone wants to address the planning commission on any item, whether it's on tonight's agenda or not, welcome to do so at this time. Come to the podium, give us your name and address for minutes, and limit your comments to 5 minutes on any issue. Extended public comments open at 9:32. Seeing none, close that back up. And final board comment. Any comments from board members? Did you enjoy your first meeting?
Yeah, it was great. It was good, thank you.
Some of them are longer than this, some of them are shorter than this. It just depends on what we've got.
If you're curious, we do have in our bylaws now that we can vote to end that once it gets so long. We can say, hey, we're pausing for the next. So I don't think we quite got there tonight.
I think it's at 10, right?
I think it's at 10,
yeah. Okay. If there's no other comments, then we have completed our agenda, and our next meeting will be, our next regular meeting will be on April